Yesterday, Antony Blinken, along with his colleague, Defence Chief Lloyd Austin, held talks with Australia's Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, and Defence Minister, Richard Marles. There was plenty to discuss. The war in Ukraine, China tensions, and closer to home, those controversial nuclear-powered submarines promised for our Navy. Secretary Blinken is the most powerful and influential diplomat striding the global stage, and he wants us to know the vital role we play in maintaining the peace in increasingly dangerous times. I spoke with him in Brisbane for his only Australian television interview. Mr. Secretary, good to meet you.
So good to be with you.
Great to see you here in Australia. Thank you for making time for us.
Thank you.
We have a lot to discuss.
No shortage.
You have got so much on your plate, juggling war and peace, climate disaster. What is your priority?
The priority really starts precisely because we have so many things happening in continuing to strengthen and to build our partnerships and our alliances with our closest friends. That's why this visit to Australia matters so much to the United States.
US and Australian foreign and defence ministers have met annually, almost without fail, for the last 4 decades. But this time, the stakes are higher than ever. Their discussions hammering out the strategic direction of both countries at a critical and perilous phase in history. We have just wrapped up 2 days of intense talks. How important is it to have these, face-to-face meetings?
It's invaluable. And, being able to spend some time just on a personal level, but also getting a chance to talk about our own lives, families, interests. And I think there's a real deep understanding of each other, and that's to the benefit of the relationship.
In the 2.5 years he's been US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken has worked up the air miles, pressing the flesh in a diplomatic dance that's taken in 70 countries around the world. But increasingly, his focus has been here on the ever-growing challenges in our own region. This is your 3rd visit to the Pacific region in just 2 months.
That's right.
Why the sense of urgency? What are you so worried about?
It's less a sense of urgency than a recognition that so much of our future is in the broad Indo-Pacific region. And we're trying to reflect that in the way we're spending our time, the way we're dedicating our resources, all of our engagement. So I think what you're seeing is really a reflection of the priority we're placing on the region as a place of extraordinary growth, extraordinary opportunity, extraordinary potential for the United States.
It's also a place of extraordinary and growing threat. And ever more assertive China is building up its military might, countered by an ever more determined United States. We heard you speak earlier about China and the threat that it poses. How do you strike the balance of pushing for peace while you are preparing for war?
Well, first, we have an obligation that we feel strongly to responsibly manage the relationship with China. For us, as for Australia and many other countries, it's one of the most consequential and complicated relationships that we have. And you can't sum it up on a bumper sticker on a car. So we're looking first and foremost at making sure that we're managing it responsibly. That starts with engaging. That starts with talking. We've been very clear with China that even as we're working to engage, to make sure that we don't miscommunicate, that we don't have misunderstandings that turn competition into conflict, we will continue, no doubt, to do and say things that they don't like, just as they'll continue to do and say things that we don't like.
What a furious Beijing definitely doesn't like is Australia's landmark deal with the US and Britain to acquire and build a fleet of shiny new nuclear submarines over the next 30 years, a project that's already shrouded in doubt. Let's talk about the AUKUS agreement. It's facing hurdles. We're seeing backlash from the US Congress. Can you guarantee Australia is going to get these submarines?
Well, first, Congress has a critical role to play in our system, and we're working through the details. But everything I've heard and seen suggests to me that there is robust bipartisan support and a commitment on the part of Congress to move forward. So that's fully my expectation.
You can understand the concern, though. 10 years from now, Australian government's holding a ticket for a Virginia class. The US Navy's holding a ticket. We're both in the same queue. Who gets it first?
Look, there are important details to work through. That's exactly what we're doing. But what I'm hearing is very much a commitment to move forward.
We recently spent some time with the US military in waters off Taiwan, and your generals told us that war is imminent, they're ready. So isn't AUKUS all too late?
On the contrary, when it comes to Taiwan, our focus, Australia's focus, is absolutely on preserving the status quo, making sure that no one disrupts the status quo by unilateral action. One of the successes of the relationship between the United States and China going back 5 decades is precisely that, the ability we've had to manage the challenges concerning Taiwan. Our focus is on making sure that that status quo is preserved. And I believe that's also very much what Australia is focused on.
If there were to be an invasion or a blockade of Taiwan, would the US expect Australia to follow?
Look, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals about what may happen. There's a deep international interest and concern about Taiwan precisely because were there to be a crisis, the impact on countries around the world, quite literally the entire world, is likely to be severe. 50% of commercial container traffic goes through the Taiwan Strait every day. In other words, world commerce depends on it. 70% of the semiconductors that are powering everything from our cell phones to our automobiles to our dishwashers, they're made on Taiwan. So any disruption could have severe consequences for the world. That's why any differences have to be resolved peacefully.
And none of us can afford a conflict there.
None of us can afford a conflict, and that's why we're determined to avoid it.
Today marks 521 days since Russia invaded Ukraine. Do you see an end to this war while Vladimir Putin is in power?
Well, the most important impediment to ending the war is Putin's conviction that he can outlast Ukraine and outlast the many countries that are supporting Ukraine. And we're working very hard to disabuse him of that notion. If we allowed what Russia's doing in Ukraine to go forward with impunity, then it's a Pandora's box that opens up. And every would-be aggressor around the world will say, well, if they can get away with it, I can get away with it too. That's a recipe for a world in conflict. That's why so many countries have stood up, including half a world away, here in Australia, Japan, Korea, many countries that are far removed from Europe. They understand the stakes, not just for Ukraine and Ukrainians, but for everyone.
Your job is all about managing risk. Vladimir Putin is threatening nuclear war, and this month we've seen the hottest temperatures on this planet on record. What is the greater threat to humanity in your mind, war or climate change?
Well, you can't have a hierarchy. There are some things that are front and center, the wolf at the door, including potential conflict, but there's no doubt that climate represents an existential challenge to all of us. So we have to multitask. Basically, we're, for better or worse, in a growth industry right now. We've got a multiplicity of challenges. We have to be able to engage them simultaneously. It's, again, one of the reasons why having such a strong partnership and alliance with Australia matters more than ever.
With all of that going on, you must feel some days that you just have the weight of the world on your shoulders. I mean, how do you stay optimistic or hopeful?
Because time and again, as much as we see challenges, as much as we see conflict, I keep seeing examples of the best of humanity, of men and women in one way or another, coming together to get something done, to make progress, to demonstrate that the better angels of our nature usually carry the day after we've tried everything else. And again, the other thing to me that's so reassuring is the fact that we have such strong partnerships and alliances. We're not in this alone. We're working it together. And at the end of the day, that gives me great confidence that we'll succeed.
Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Safe travels home.
Thanks. Great to be with you.
Hello, I'm Amelia Adams. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for our brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minute segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.